Courage 1000 Project, the podcast for women seeking the courage to take the next steps in life. My name is MellyS The Story Collector, and I'm on a mission to normalise the emotional cycles all women experience, so we can end the patterns of shame and guilt that are leaving us stuck, held back and disempowered from making the next chapter of our lives magical. Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Courage 1000 Project. Now today we have the beautiful Ashley Van Brabant joining us. Now Ashley is a Belief Re-patterning Practitioner, founder of the Adventurous Spirit and creator of the Unlearn Uplevel program. Now, growing up in rural Alberta, she was a sensitive soul with a passion for horses, nature, and spirituality. So definitely my type of lady. Now she is a transformative spirit standing for equality, leadership, hope, and adventure. On any given day, you will find her with her horses, snowboarding, or having hard conversations about environmental, social, and political issues. So I know we're going to have lots of fun in this episode. Hello and welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So tell me more about this snowboarding thing, because we don't have much snow here in Australia. So how'd you get into that?
Yeah. So, I mean, where I live, Alberta, we have a pretty good winter.
Yep.
And with lots of snow. And where I live, I'm just about 4 hours away from the Rocky Mountains. And so I kind of grew up skiing.
Yep.
And then when I was a teenager, I decided to try snowboarding, and I really loved it. And I just kept on snowboarding, and it's yep. fun. I'm a instructor now, so
awesome.
Yeah, I sometimes instruct. There's a ski hill not very far from where I live, and it's a nonprofit ski hill, so sometimes I work there in the winter.
Yep. I love it. It's a foreign concept for us here in Australia. Like, go surfing, yep, every day, but snowboarding is not something that comes up often.
Yeah, definitely. Not so much.
Now today you wanted to share your story and some information around changing self-perception. So I'd love to know, where does your story begin when it comes to that self-perception and self-shunning, I believe is the word you were using.
Yeah. So I mean, it begins childhood, like most stories. I grew up in a family. We live rurally a little bit, and so kind of grew up with the kind of mindset of like, just tough it out. You don't wear your emotions on your sleeve. You just like keep those inside, keep it tough. Don't let anybody see you cry. Don't let anybody, be like a girl. So I grew up, I hated pink. I almost never cried. And, I was just tough and cool. And I felt like, I was who I was, and I was a bit, not a rebel per se in the typical stereotypical rebel, icon thing, but like just rebellious in the fact that like nobody could tell me what to do.
Headstrong.
And I thought, sorry?
Headstrong.
Oh, yes. And, I thought that growing up, I thought that I was really authentic, and other people thought that I was really authentic, but I didn't, but it wasn't quite true. Because inside, like, I was really sensitive. I care a lot about, nature. I care a lot about animals. I care a lot about other people. And so, but I was just pretending like it didn't matter to me when it did. And so I just kind of shunned that part of myself, that sensitive part of myself. And that ended up having some consequences called depression. And I was like, oh yeah, if you are a sensitive person and then you grow up in like a culture that says sensitivity is bad and you shun that part of you, that doesn't equal mental health.
I completely agree with that. I had a very similar upbringing. It was no blood, don't cry were the rules. And same thing. It was like the eldest child, you just got on with life. There was no time for emotions, for feeling. That was not a society that we were raised in. So, of course, you shun those parts of yourself, and anxiety and depression creep in because you're not being true.
Exactly. Yeah. And on the outside, like, it looked like I was being authentic. It looked like I was doing my own thing. And that was true to a respect. But I was only doing the things and only showing the parts of me that were accepted in society.
Yeah.
And
I hear that 100%. Yep.
Yeah, and that led to, you know, the shunning the parts of me that didn't fit. Like, the environment mattered to me, and, you know, I tried to, like, you know, start those conversations and things like that, but it didn't go well because I tried doing that in a way that was inauthentic. I tried just being tough about it and, like, you know, angry about it and frustrated about it, and it just didn't translate because all people heard was that emotional static.
Yes.
And they were naturally repulsed from it. And it took me a really long time to figure out what was going on there.
Yeah. So how did you figure it out?
Yeah.
And it's a big question, I know.
It is a big question. And it was, you know, it's one of those things that took a really long time. It was like a piece by piece by piece by piece. When I was younger, 12-ish, I did get started in alternative health. I don't know if people know what Bodytalk is, but basically it's a modality in the alternative health kind of field. And one of the employees that was working for my mom at the time, she needed somebody to practice on. And so she practiced on my mom, and my mom really loved it. So then she got sessions for us kids growing up. And I just, like, loved it. There was something about that just, you know, resonated with me. And it was like, there's something to this. And I remember one time it, like, came up that there was, like, anger in my liver or something. And I remember telling my cousin on the school bus, I was like, oh my God. And then there was, like, anger in my liver. How cool is that? And her response was like, that's weird. That's what that is. And so that moment again was a moment of, like, oh, not acceptable, you know, put that away. And, you know, it's the tried to hide it as much as you could, but you really can't, because it's just an integral part of who you are.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just went down that path in, like, high school and stuff, and then, you know, spirituality, and I was a weird spiritual kid. And okay, I'm talking about how I learned. Okay. So it's a little bit about, like,
our stories are never straightforward. I completely
No. I was like, okay, I'm going to talk about how I learned to shun before I talk about how I learned how to accept, if that's okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that was, like, part one of shunning that part of myself. And then the next part came when I was in university. There was a diploma, a holistic health diploma. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do, because I knew that I liked it. So I naturally, you know, went into it. And then halfway through my diploma, I discovered a book in the library that I thought would be really helpful in my papers. It was called Trick or Treatment, The Undeniable Facts to Alternative Medicine. And I was like, awesome. You know, here's some, like, hard science that will, you know, help me when I write my papers. No, not awesome. It was written in such a apologetic way, and it took everything that I had been taught in school, like, oh, research doesn't address this, or research doesn't address this, and all of those things. It took each of them and basically dismantled them, and went through all of the research that was available for some of the really kind of heavy hitters, I guess you could say, in the alternative health field, like acupuncture. And it was like, the evidence doesn't support. And it was a part of my identity from so young. And it just, like, felt like I just ripped in two. So I was like, I can't, in integrity, what I thought was integrity at the time, you know, I can't be this for other people. And so that was the second part of the self-shunning that happened.
Hard to lose your identity like that, especially when you're studying it for your future. That's big.
Yeah, it was an existential crisis. Yeah. Absolutely.
I can completely get that. Yes.
Yeah. And so then I was like adrift for a little ways. And a funny piece about that now is that one of the reasons I went into that program was I wanted to study NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
To help, change beliefs and stuff like that, because I was really interested in that. But at the time that I went, they weren't having that as an elective. And so then I was like cast adrift for the next couple of years. And, I worked odd jobs at Costco, and then I worked at Starbucks, and then, just odd jobs.
Yourself in the odd jobs.
Yeah. And actually went to Australia for a year and backpacked around Australia for a year.
Yeah.
And came back, worked at a barn. And then a couple of years into that, the depression that I was shunning, it came in full force, really, really intensely, as something that I really had to deal with. And it was a crisis point in my life, a mental health crisis point. And I got dragged to a Belief Re-patterning workshop. And I went into that workshop pretty suicidal. And I left that workshop barely suicidal.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, there's something to this. And the interesting part of that is I thought that I was being true to myself.
Yeah.
Like before then, I thought, exactly, I convinced myself that I was being true to myself. But what I didn't realize at the time was I was actually being true to the parts of myself that other people accepted.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really big. And a lot of women are stuck in that place, because to move forward from that takes so much courage, and it's scary. It's really scary to do.
Absolutely. People thought that I was courageous going to Australia by myself. And I was like, it's little bit, it's mostly exciting, if anything.
That's a birthday.
Yeah. It's, no big deal. But asking for what you need, that's next level.
Yeah. So what happened for you then once you found that courage to start speaking up and being true to yourself?
I think the courage that I needed before I could do that, because I'm naturally really opinionated. So
I love opinionated women, just saying. We have stuff to say, and it's about time we say it.
Absolutely. And so I practice that kind of courageous vulnerability often, but the courage that was really pivotal for me was the courage to face where I was. And face some of the hard truths that I was running away from.
Yeah.
That was that depression, that mental illness is a real thing that you can't think away.
Yeah.
I mean, I can reframe all day, but it doesn't mean that it's not something that isn't true.
Yeah. And there's no level of positive thinking will make depression go away if you haven't addressed the underlying issues in the first place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I look at it, throwing a Band-Aid on an arrow wound or a broken arm. It's not going to fix it. The underlying cause is still there. That needs to be addressed.
Yeah, there's healing that needs to happen before that. And, positive thinking is can be really helpful in healing, but positive thinking alone isn't healing.
Correct. Yeah. Fully agree with you there.
Yeah. There's more ingredients to healing than positive thinking. Positive thinking is a great ingredient, and there's others.
Yeah. Positive thinking to me is the maintenance tool. It's not the healing tool.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So how did you get to that place? Like how, like you've been to this seminar, you've gone in suicidal, come out going, oh, okay, actually I want to live. Depression is slowly lifting. What happened for you after that?
Well, after that, I was still in a crisis place.
Yeah.
I was shaking a lot. And what I think is not talked enough in mental health circles is having a supportive community. Where I was still working at the barn, but I was surrounded by friends and by people who loved me and were really flexible, especially work-wise. They were like, you know what, if you have to, work an hour, take 2-hour break, like that's fine.
That's
do what you need to do.
Support.
Yeah, because like I would like work an hour and then like be shaking so bad that I couldn't, right? I just couldn't. And so I just actually kept on going to the same workshop. I went to about 4 times, and in the workshop there is a decision-making model that, you go through to help you make decisions. And, you're supposed to make decisions that you've been putting off that are, kind of important, but like not life-changing.
Yeah.
And this was the second workshop that I went to, and I was like, I ain't doing that. I need to decide whether I'm going to accept myself or not accept myself.
Yeah. You don't play the small field. You went straight. What's the big thing? I'm facing that. Like backpacking around Australia for a year. Let's just do this.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily afraid of the big questions. Which sometimes gets me in a bit of a trouble.
Oh, I hear you. I'm the same.
Oh my gosh, yes. And so part of this process is you flip a coin and see what happens. And so the coin flipped on the decision to not accept myself. And it was one of those moments where time stopped. And I had this forward flashing vision of like what my life would look like down this road. And I could just see that my mental illness would get worse. And like a psych ward was my next step. And just there wouldn't be any quality of life. And it was like a hole that I wouldn't be able to come out of. There was nothing there that I wanted.
Yeah.
So that was like the, oh, damn moment where I really had to like turn myself around and start walking back up the road towards self-acceptance.
I love it. I love it. And it's interesting that you've mentioned all these key points, because part of what we're doing with this project is normalizing the cycles that women go through. And you've pinpointed all of them so beautifully in your experience. So you've started off as this headstrong, who I call princess. I like to refer to them as archetypes. Okay. And she's the princess archetype. She gets out there, does what she wants, rebels against anybody who tells her not to do it, and has this false sense of confidence.
Bravado.
It's the bravado. It's not courage. It's just bravado. It's, I've got this. This is my life. I'm going to do things my way, which is fair enough. She's got to learn it herself. But then we step into the mother archetype. Yeah, I was the same. Don't worry. And I have a daughter who's exactly the same as well. So I'm watching it play out again. And then you stepped into this mother phase, which is self-love. And then you went, oh, well, how do I love me when I'm fake? And then that depression, the anxiety, all those really heavy emotions start creeping in until you can get to that point of self-love. And I love that you then mentioned anger, because then we step into that wild woman phase where you're looking at the past and you're getting really angry at society, at everything, for suppressing who you truly are. And then you stepped into this beautiful space where you saw the future, which to me is our dark queen or our intuition speaking. And you went, I can see the future if I keep doing this. I don't like that future. And you claimed your self-worth and went, no, I'm worth more than that. So I'm going this way. And then you stepped in that final stage and you did it. You changed your life.
Yeah.
And I love that. You very beautifully demonstrated those 5 stages that all women go through. But for you and for me, I was the same. We do it on a big grand scale rather than in this tiny moment over here. Let's just apply this to like the deepest parts of our lives. And that's how we're going to cycle through this. Oh, I love it. I love it. So I would love to know, after you've been through all of this, you stepped forward into your life fully. What did you do with it once you fully accepted yourself and you moved forward?
So the self-acceptance continues to be a journey. So that moment that I described earlier, where I saw the future and then had to turn around, that happened January, I think around 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so since that happened, I've had to kind of do tiny bits of reclaiming who I am. And it's really interesting because, you know, I think I arrived to this moment where like, self-love, self-acceptance, I made it. And then something else walks in and I'm like, oh, there's more.
It's like, hello, next layer.
Yes. Yeah. So the most recent one that I can speak to is reading, is books. I really, really love books.
Yeah.
But another one of those things I was just like too busy for. You know, it wasn't working, so it wasn't valuable. And I've recently been like, oh, books, reading. I'm just going to read for the pleasure of reading. And and that has been the next self-acceptance. I'm like, oh, I can accept the part of me that like loves to read for the sake of a story and imagination and you know, going and just losing myself in a book. Like that's acceptable. And so that has been the most recent one. And it's progressed because at first I had to change how I thought about life. That was my first step to changing my perception. And I had this mantra that life was hard and painful because up until then, that's what my life had been like. But with Belief Re-patterning, it's really about changing your story. So when I identified that was the story that was going through my head, I was like, oh, I need a new story. And so I picked a couple of new words. In Belief Re-patterning, there's these posters and you can just like point to words. And that's all I did. I was like pointed to words and it was like connect with ease. And I was like, okay, new mantra, life connects with ease. Okay, we're going to try that on for a little bit. And so that allowed me to connect with people a little bit more. That allowed me to, you know, sit and allow like to flow more without that knee jerk, if I don't make it happen, it's not going to happen. Which not true. Not true. There is a greater whole going on for your benefit if you're willing to just sit there and wait for a second. And so that was the first thing that needed to change. And then I needed to change my perception of myself. And be like, okay, so I'm not a terrible person. I'm somebody who cares deeply. Because, you know, one of the other stories that was going on in my head was like, I'm a terrible person because I don't do more. You know, do more to help the world, do more to help my friends. You know, I'm not there for them enough. I'm not, you know, all of that stuff. And I was like, instead of saying that I should do more, what if that meant that I cared and I was a caring person? And so it's just little bits like that. And then the next stage for me was the needs piece, like understanding. I was actually working with a coach at the time, And she sent me this list of needs, and it was just like long. And I was like, we have more needs than like food, water, shelter.
Have you seen the Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We seem to think that base level needs is all we need, but it's all we need to survive. It's not all we need to be fulfilled.
Yeah. And like, you know, all of those other needs. And it's so interesting. I learned that in school, but something about it never clicked in until when I was actually working with a coach, and I was like, oh, wait, play is a need?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's like, oh, okay, I think I need to change some things here.
Yeah. And things that like spontaneity. So spontaneity really spoke to me, and I was like, I don't get it. But one of the things that kept on tripping me up was every time that I planned something, I would like self-sabotage it by doing something else. But I was like, am I self-sabotaging, or am I just meeting an unconscious need for spontaneity?
Yes, I love it. Yep.
So
because we do get to that point too, where we look at our actions and go, okay, so am I self-sabotaging? Am I doing something destructive, or is this something else at play? Because, yeah, one is a negative reaction, but another could be a positive one. But it looks the same from the outside.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love that.
It's kind of the principle of like the universe is working for you. And it's something that I apply to myself is like, I'm working for me, not against me.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like that next level of like, oh, like I'm on the same team.
Yep.
Like it doesn't have to be like, it could be like this and we could just go together.
Yep. I love it. I love it. We do have to wrap up soon. So I do have one question for you, because we could talk about this forever. There's
God, all day.
But I'd love to know that if you could go back in time and face yourself before it all began, what would you say to yourself then?
I'd say you got this. Yeah. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be hard, and you have what it takes.
Oh, I love that. I love that, because I have no doubt there is somebody watching this right now who has been in a very similar situation or is going through it right now who needs to hear that. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because we are very, very similar. I've had a very similar journey. And one of the things I have on my bracelets, I've got mantra bracelets. And one of them is, you've got this.
Ah, excellent.
I love it. I love it. Now, what I would like to say is a big, big thank you for coming on, because we've had an amazing conversation. I love it. And if anybody watching would like to get in touch with Ashley, you'll find her information below the video if you're watching across the social media platforms, or if you're listening to the podcast version, just jump into the description and you'll be able to contact her in that way. So it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for coming on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this project. Courage is amazing, and I think that this is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Hang around. We're going to keep talking.
You're welcome.
Now, join us next week as we continue on our mission to collect stories of courage so you can find the inspiration you need to find your own. If you'd like to join me on my mission to normalize the emotional and intuitive cycles all women go through, join my free community at mellys.com.au.